Hello, hello.
I can do the bow jazz.
That would be amazing.
Yes, I'm wearing my shoes though. I feel like that's kind of weird.
Hey guys, we're going to start. Who might be taking a seat? There's a lot of space out there on the benches. Oh.
We're good.
All right, so just a few quick announcements. For one, Big Data Day LA is coming up July 9th. We're promoting that. Again, free conference, Big Data Conference, 4th year we're doing this. We expect 100 people this year, completely free. I just turned on the registration today. So you guys can go to the website and just register. In other news, I think we're going to have some more great meetups coming up pretty soon. I'll be working on and probably next few weeks I'll send out some notices on that. With that, I just want to introduce Donna from Team 1. We can do a round of applause from Team 1 for hosting this event.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for coming tonight. It looks like a great turnout. So I am part of the talent team here. So I recruit talent for Team 1. And if any of you are interested in working here, I'm the person to talk to. Team 1, in case you didn't know, Team 1 is a full-service advertising agency here in beautiful Los Angeles, Playa Vista. And some of our clients are Lexus, Ritz-Carlton, Indian Motorcycles, EA. And I think that about wraps it up. And if you have any questions at all about the agency or working here, please come to me and I'll help you as best I can. I'm going to turn it back over to Subhash D'Souza. Thank you very much.
So I just wanted to logistics. I hope you know that there's no parking on the lot. If you do park, there's no violation. If you need to park outside in the streets. With that, I'm going to introduce the Netflix team. So today we have the content data engineering team from Netflix. And I'm going to let them come and introduce themselves. So we have Monisha, Chris, and Jason who do a talk today. Just a round of applause for Netflix and thanks for coming.
Thank you all for coming. My name is Monisha Kanoth. I am going to share with you how we do record data analytics at Netflix with my colleagues Jason and Chris. A little bit about myself. I've been at Netflix for over 3 years now in a senior data architect position. Before that, I was at a startup, Convertro in Santa Monica, and prior to that, I was at MySpace for 3 years. I let Chris introduce himself.
Thanks. My name is Chris Stevens. I've been at Netflix for about 2 years now. I'm a data engineer on the content analytics team. Before I was at Netflix, I was at a small machine learning and predictive analytics startup in Pasadena. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jason Flitner. I'm a senior BI engineer at Netflix. I've been with Netflix for a little over a year, and I work a little bit more on the front end, kind of building out all of our BI solutions and working with our business to make sure that they have what they need from that data perspective. Thanks.
So Chris, Jason, and I have a bunch of material to cover, so we'll kind of take questions in the end, if that's okay. We'll kind of linger afterwards too, if you want to kind of stop by and ask any burning question that you may have. So let's get started. So quick kind of show of hands, how many of you guys have Netflix? It's awesome. So we'll get started with what we do internally to enable rapid data analytics. So we are a part of data engineering and analytics at Netflix, DEA. Not the DEA that got Pablo. The main charter of DEA at Netflix is threefold. We build, curate, and maintain the data model. We build data pipelines to serve analytic needs. And we also build tools, dashboards, and apps so that users can self-serve, and we also generate algorithmically driven insights. Now, within the DEA organization, the content analytics team is based down here in Beverly Hills. And the content analytics team serves the content buying organization. And what we do for the content buying organization is give them a sense of how titles on the service are doing, how they're performing in different territories. We also give them insight into what kind of new content to look at opportunistically to either buy or license. So we're able to give them insight into those kinds of metrics. So Netflix has been in the news lately quite a bit. It's a big consumer brand. Recently, in January, we launched in over 190 countries. So what that means is, for the first time, when Daredevil Season 2 launched earlier in March, it's available for people or consumers all over the world at the same time. You're able to kind of have that cultural conversation at the same time. It's a really cool kind of experience. It's never been done before. And the amount of money that is going into content spend just this 1 year is $6 billion. It's just simply a staggering amount that's going into content spend. So as you can imagine, there's a great hunger within the company to desire to know how the content is doing. How are users in different countries behaving differently? How are some genres performing differently in different countries? How should we consider renewing new seasons? How do users kind of go through episodes in a series? Do they drop off? Do they don't drop off? Now, to really get a sense of that, there is definitely a demand on our team. And we're a small team. We're a team of 7 people. So it's relatively lean. So how are we able to serve the needs of the business that's changing, that's morphing, that's evolving all the time as the needs of our consumers are changing, as we see their tastes evolving? So we really have to kind of focus on components that allow us to grow and scale and serve the needs in a really smart way. So how do we go about doing that? So the main component of what we are able to do is based in culture and technology. The intersection of culture and technology is the core of everything that we do. We'll get into more technical detail as we proceed through the presentation, but I really want to set the foundation of the cultural conversations that we have that enable us to move quickly, that enable us to do things that may not be as possible in other organizations. So there's just, when I started at Netflix 3 years ago, there was this earlier version of the deck that had this really cool quote that resonated with me, and I would love to share that with you. It says, if you want to build a ship, don't drum up people and ask them to cut wood and give them jobs and tasks. Instead, teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. That really is kind of a cool way to think about it as an engineer. You're not given like, do this, do that. You're kind of given a bigger picture, a bigger charter. And so you're kind of inspired from within you to kind of see how you fit the big picture. And from that comes great work. So I've written, like aspects of our culture that really resonate. We have freedom and responsibility, context, not control, highly aligned, loosely coupled. These are really things that we consider every day when we decide what kind of technical path to go down. And the values we really take into account are courage, communication, passion, impact. What do these mean? What does courage mean? Courage means that you're able to say what you think, even though it may be controversial. You're able to take smart risks. What does having communication mean? It means that you listen to your colleagues. You're able to not react as quickly. When you disagree with them, you're able to do that respectfully. What does impact mean? Impact means that you do an amazing amount of great work. Your colleagues rely on you for performance. And my favorite, judgment. It means that you're able to make wise decisions in spite of ambiguity. You're able to tell your stakeholders what you can do now, what you can do later, and you're able to make decisions on what's possible, what your solution does and what it doesn't do. So now I'll kind of show you a really brief overview of our tech stack. It is in no way complete. It kind of just shows like a brief overview of tools that we interact with on a daily basis. And it could have changed since the last time you saw this. The key thing to remember is our source of truth lies in S3. All of our data lies in S3. We have high metadata on top of it, and that kind of comprises our core data warehouse. And we are able to interact with it using a variety of tools. You're able to use Hive, Presto, Pig, Spark. The philosophy is that you use the tool that works. There's not kind of a thinking that there should be only one kind of tool that you should be using. And you have a variety of internal tools that allow you to do things quicker. The thing to note is the data platform team, the teams that maintain these are world-class. We have access to that, so that definitely allows us to iterate quickly. It allows us to move faster. Jason in his presentation will talk about our BI aspects. So now let's talk about technology and culture, how in actionable ways we are able to move rapidly. So, one thing that, in any kind of complex data warehouse, you end up with an environment where there are very complex lineages and dependencies. How do you figure out making a small tweak to a data definition? What is the unforeseen result that happens as a result of that? You make some data model changes, the table changes, and your stakeholders are impacted. You can go the route of spending a tremendous amount of time figuring out what the lineages are, talking to data architects, getting buy-in. Or you can make the path where you have a very simple rollback strategy, where you can deploy something with the confidence that if it does not work out, you can roll back quickly. So in our world, the way it works is all of our data lies in S3, we have high metadata on top of it. The way we've kind of architected our system is that for tables in S3, you have high metadata, and the underlying tables are written in separate buckets that are based on epoch time. So that allows us two advantages. It gives us the functionality to be able to deal with any S3 eventual consistency issues. And you're also able to roll back with kind of a simple metadata change. You're able to make a deployment, see who's impacted, and if it's a quick fix, if somebody is indeed impacted, you make the fix. If it's a tremendous amount of change for a team that you did not see or did not come up in your exploration, you roll back, you restore state. You're not kind of stuck in an analysis paralysis mode. You have a bias to action, and you're able to get things done. The not so sexy part about being an ETL developer is a tremendous amount of time goes into cleansing data. You're doing string manipulations, you're doing date map, you're dealing with UTF-8 encoding issues, you're dealing with conforming dimensions. You're dealing with all these things that take a lot of time and take you away from spending that time in business logic. So as an organization, the way we've been thinking about it is all the different teams, all the engineers in these teams contribute to developing data patterns. So think of like date time manipulation or string manipulation. You have UDFs. You have Python UDFs where you need them. You have pig macros where you need them. You have templates for shipping data for, through different systems, from Teradata to Hive, from S3 to Redshift, so that the majority of your time goes into developing actual business logic, and you're not spending a lot of time on doing these things that are time-consuming. So you develop your muscle, and you're able to see that as quick results. The other dilemma that an engineer faces is you come to, you see a problem and you have to kind of go to your manager and you say, okay, I can go down this path. It's going to take me 3 weeks of engineering time, 4 weeks of engineering time. I'm going to build a beautiful, elegant engineering solution. It's going to last the test of time, or I can just do something quick and dirty in a couple of days. I don't know if it's going to serve a long time. It's kind of a rough process. You have a lot of I/O, a lot of bandwidth, but it gets something in the hands of business users quickly. So you kind of make those decisions and take those shortcuts, knowing that you spending 3 or 6 weeks of engineering time and developing something is no good because the business has evolved. They have changed by the time you put it in deployment. No one cares about it anymore. So make those decisions, take those shortcuts, and then be able to stand for it. Be able to say, I've made this decision, it's not perfect. If the need rises that this is something that the business really cares about, we'll come back and re-engineer this. That really frees up your time to do the things that business really cares about. And the thing that happens as a result is that the platform team, they start seeing you doing this kind of things that are unconventional, that are maybe suboptimal, and they look at things and say, okay, you're doing this because your needs are not met in some other way. What can we do to make your life easier? You have that conversation that says, I can do it this way, it takes 6 weeks because our infrastructure is set up like this. If you made the shipping data from here to here easier, we would be all moving faster. So it kind of enables the space to have that conversation. So for every engineer, the key thing is that you have your new development that you do, the things that you're measured against, your quarterly initiatives, and you have the stuff that takes your mind share, right? The stuff that you maintain, the stuff that breaks all the time, the stuff that you have to kind of support. But the key thing to remember is it's something that you're maintaining for a really long time. It's very lightly used, or not used at all. The chances are that it's inaccurate or worse, wrong. Have the courage to say, this is not being used anymore. I want to deprecate this. And so that really frees up your engineering time to develop new things. Find opportunities to deprecate and kill things. As soon as you deploy, know that when you deploy something and you hit the ground, it already has an expiration date tied to it. It's going to go away soon. To think that it's going to stand the test of time, is one way to look at it, but knowing that you have to adapt to test is probably another way to look at it that may help the business better. Anytime there is lack of ownership, anytime something lies in a dead zone, no one knows who owns it, or someone who owns it kind of got into it because someone gave it to them, they're not able to tell you what the data means, where it comes from, there's a real tangible cost to business. Because other teams, what they're doing is they're working around it. They're having to make assumptions about it. They're trying to create pipelines, and they're building costs, and that can totally be avoided. Have the conversation and say, no one's owning this, find an owner. You need to have an owner for every pipeline. Someone who says, I own this from start to finish. Without having an owner, you cannot deprecate it. You cannot deploy it. You're kind of not creating an environment for success with that particular project. Find an owner, or possibly find a way to deprecate it. This is my favorite. I've been at Netflix for 3 years. I still feel like a newbie. There are so many things that come up all the time that I really feel like I can ask the simplest, most basic question about. There is a bunch of different user groups. There is a Hive user group, a Teradata, Redshift, Spark, Pig, and there's really a culture where anybody can kind of raise your hand and ask a really simple question. There's no judgment that, oh, you've been here so long, you should know this already. or it's too simple to ask. That really creates a space for everybody to know and be transparent and learn. So when the culture is working great and things are working great, everything's lovely. But when things are not working great, when there are mistakes, that is, I think, like a true test of the efficacy of your culture. In this particular case, House of Cards last year, season 3 coming out, huge launch for us. It got released a few weeks before launch on accident. It got a lot of press. So at that point, the decision was made internally to, instead of just kind of shutting down access, making deployment really hard, to actually give freedom to the teams that had to make the change so that they had the most control on the outcome and they were able to make smart decisions. This really kind of shows the trust your team has on you. So when things go wrong, the natural tendency is to shut down, but maybe an alternate way is to trust your team, give them freedom, and they'll truly deliver to that. Thank you. So with that, I'll pass it over to Chris, and he'll kind of talk more examples of our culture and technology.
Okay. So I wanted to see if I could walk through a few lessons that Netflix has learned over the last several years when trying to scale quickly and keep our agility, continue to operate as nimbly as we did when we were a few hundred people shipping. So I'm going to focus more on the data warehouse, and when Jason comes up, he's going to focus more on kind of the front end side, user interaction, data visualization, business intelligence, etc. So if we were to make some recommendations for you from the things that we've learned about how to keep our analytics environment agile, the first thing we would tell you to do is let everybody on your team drop tables in production whenever they want. So I heard a little bit of snickering. So what, the way that we think about it, why do organizations put restrictions in place on what people can and cannot do in production data warehouses, right? I think a lot of it is carryover from the productionalization of operational systems, which in my mind is something very different than a data warehouse. Really, people put controls on production deployments to prevent mistakes. But we would assert that the thing that you have to think about is the cost of a mistake versus the cost of preventing that mistake, right? The tax that you're putting on your developers every time they want to move something to production, which is really just another word for delivering data and analytics products to your customers, right? Moving something to production, that all that means is like you're delivering. You're doing what you've been hired to do, right? So think about these things, right? We found in our experience that while people make mistakes, conscientious people don't make mistakes as often as you would think, right? When was the last time that somebody at Netflix logged into production and accidentally wrote, drop table, biggest fact table, right? I'm sure that's happened once or twice, but it's actually very rare. Our data warehouse isn't treated like an operational system, right? It's an analytic environment, and if there's a problem in the data warehouse, if we lose access to data for days, Netflix is going to keep streaming. People are going to be able to keep watching movies. The people who are buying movies and negotiating with movie studios are still able to do that if they don't have access to the data warehouse, right? So we would argue that the impact on the business, of an accident doesn't justify a very big cost when it comes to deployment. So we do have some measures of protection in place. I thought I'd tell you guys a little bit about some of the things we think help protect us when it comes to deployments. in our Hive data warehouse, all of our tables are external tables, pointed at S3. So our ETL processes, instead of overwriting the data currently in the table, we use a pattern where we'll write kind of a new folder on S3 that uses a Unix epoch for when the process started as the name of the folder. And we effectively do something that's the equivalent of altering the location of the external table in the Hive metastore once the ETL process completes. So this means if there's ever a problem with the load for a day, we can just repoint the data in the Hive metastore back to the previous day's batch ID, and it's like things never happened. It also means that if somebody logs into production and accidentally drops a table, you're not actually affecting any data, right? So if you just recreate the table and point it to the same location, you know, it's like it never happened, right? It's like it disappears. Similarly, in our MPP databases, we've gotten very good at making sure that we can restore tables from backups. Surprisingly, I've been in organizations that have spent so much time protecting their production deployments that they haven't really had an opportunity to use their backup and recovery systems, and sometimes they don't work. So with the way that we deploy, we've made sure that if we need to recover a table from our backups, that we totally can. And as it turns out, most database vendors have really good backup and recovery solutions in place, right? These are well documented, well thought out problems. So we actually have a stored procedure that we wrote that allows any engineer working on the platform to upgrade their privileges to the equivalent of super user, right? A privilege level that lets you create and drop tables kind of in our production schema. But the cool thing about this is that it automatically takes away those privileges after a reasonable period of time. I think it's set to a couple of hours. So it's not like we're all walking around with super user privileges all the time. We only need to turn this on when we want to do a deployment, and then we can turn it off once the deployment finishes. So what this really allows us to do, think about the last time, if you're in an environment that controls access to production, think about the last time that you got through testing a pipeline and or got through testing a software product and said, okay, we're ready to deploy to production. When you got to that point, you're already done. We've already moved on to the next project. When you think about the number of times that a team basically delivers something to customers, right? That's kind of a demarcation of when you would think about a deployment to production. We think about the number of times that you deploy things to customers, and then the number of engineers on the team. The cost of having a formal deployment process, I think is a lot bigger than most people think. So we would assert that most organizations can work the way that we do if you want to. I'll challenge you. If you have an organization that has a very formal deployment process, go back to your boss, tell them about what Netflix does, and try it out for a week. Take a subset of one team and say, for this one team, we're going to circumvent, sending the stuff to a DBA, and we're just going to log into production and just do it ourselves. And let me know what happens. It'll be one of two things, right? Either somebody will log in and drop your big fact table, in which case you can fire someone without a performance improvement plan, right? You just immediately, for cause, you don't even have to think about it. But I'm pretty sure that probably won't happen. What will probably happen is those people that you've given that privilege to, they'll use it responsibly. They'll be careful when they log into production, and you'll realize that that's another piece of process that you really don't need. So our second recommendation is don't have an on-call. Get rid of your on-call. Is anybody in the room on call right now? Okay, we've got one guy here. So we intentionally chose a building that has no pager reception. It doesn't have any at all. So if you just throw your pager away and tell them that it's our fault. You can do that at least for tonight. So we've developed a system that we call First Responder. Curious to hear how similar this is to the way that you guys operate. So when I think of somebody being on call, what I traditionally think of is, if there's an important process, maybe that, if we're talking about data integration, maybe it's something that runs overnight. If something gets stalled and you want to make sure the reports are there in the morning, then I was at a job once where if a certain process got stalled, I would get paged at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And the expectation was that we'd wake up and would, fix it. We try to not do that at all in our environment. So we've created a system we call First Responder. Everyone on the team takes a 1-week shift. This includes both BI and data engineers. So whether you do data visualizations or whether you're in the guts of the piping, both people take this role for a week. Even our managers have tried it, just to get a sense of how much of a burden it is on the team. Right? We've got the kinds of hands-on managers that kind of want to see it for themselves, which I think is really cool. So the first responder means just that. The individual who's the first responder is the first one to respond to a problem in the system. So they'll handle common failures. If there's a network blip and they need to restart a job that is scheduled every day, they'll do simple things like that. If there's a problem with the process that is more complicated than kind of something simple, instead of doing an email blast to the whole team, they'll reach out directly to the owner of that process and will, either get help fixing it or we'll hand it off to the owner. And then whenever possible, if there's anything they need to handle communication for, they'll do that as well. The real goal of the first responder while they're on that week is that we're allocating one person from the team to try to protect everyone else's time and focus. So when you're on first responder, you're trying to make sure that the people on your team don't get interrupted unnecessarily. So some of the things that we do to kind of help us with this process, inside of our data integration job scheduling flow, we've got this flow that kicks off at midnight when all of the data from all of the Netflix devices around the world has come into our data center and it's time to start crunching it. We've got a series of data integration jobs. We've actually visually separated the stuff that needs attention when it fails and the stuff that doesn't. So it's very clear for people what they need to pay attention to. We get email alerts if any of our need to pay attention to or above the line jobs are running more slow than usual, or if they aren't completed by a certain time. So that our first responder doesn't have to be watching the process. They can just kind of, if you don't hear anything, then you're probably in good shape. And then we've had everyone on the team contribute to a playbook of common failures for their own processes. So this will say things like, for the job that loads this particular data table, if it fails, it's okay to skip it for a day. Right? So we've all been pretty diligent about making sure our entries in the playbook are complete, because the more complete our playbook entries are, the fewer times problems get escalated to us, right? The more things that the first responder can maybe handle on their probably the most important thing that we've learned in going through the process of setting up our first responder system is that we've tried to develop a really keen sense of what is actually urgent and what isn't. So step back and think about it for a minute. What kinds of problems in a data environment really are urgent? One of the criteria that we use is how is the lack of availability of this particular data going to affect the business? And it turns out that for some data sets, having that data set unavailable is much more important than other data sets, right? So if you're in an environment that treats every time there's a failure in your data pipeline as something urgent that needs to be addressed, we feel like organizing ourselves that way just bled our very small team's time, right? It took us away from important new work to focus on things that we were kind of addressing just because there was like a red box on a GUI, right? We've also tried to start building our processes in such a way that if they fail, we can ignore them for a little while, right? So some examples of how you can do this. If you've got a long process that is doing a bunch of steps to transform data, if there's a failure somewhere in the middle of the process, of course, try to leave the old data in the final table. Kind of don't switch them until the very end of the process, and think about whether that particular table actually needs to be updated every day, right? Maybe you've got some dimension tables that really don't change very often, and if you miss updating it for 2 or 3 days, it's really not a very big deal. Say, well, what if I'm using surrogate keys on my fact tables and you need to make sure that the surrogates are updated? Well, consider reprocessing more of your fact data than you would normally need to. So if you've got a process that ingests, all of the fact data that came in yesterday, think about reprocessing the last 5 days of fact data every day. So what do you get from that? If one of the associated dimensions that you're doing lookups against started failing 3 days ago and you haven't had time to look at it yet, when you fix it eventually, when you reprocess the last 5 days of fact data, it'll update all of those keys automatically, right? So it's worthwhile to spend compute time on your cluster to save humans from interruption, right? That's the trade-off that we're willing to pay. So our third recommendation will be that make sure that everybody owns ETL at some point or when they need to. Do we have anybody in the room that is working in a data group and maybe focuses on either business intelligence or data visualization or one of those types of areas? Data analysts? I didn't see many hands, but well, I think some of these concepts may apply to people in all kinds of roles, not just people doing data integration versus business intelligence. Something that happens pretty frequently in an environment like ours. So we've got people who kind of build data pipelines, and then we've got people that kind of work with our stakeholders and help visualize data for them. You can kind of think of them as front end and back end roles. That would be a good analogy to people who are more on the software side. So sometimes our front end people need a data table structured in a certain way to make it easy to build their report, right? So you've got your data and your dimensional model over here, and they're like, man, I wish I just had a table that was laid out exactly like this so I could just suck it in and everything would be really easy. So in other environments, that front-end person will maybe go find a back-end person and say, hey, can you build this table for me? People ask me that all the time, and I say, go build it yourself. But I say it in a very nice way. what we found is that this is actually a better solution. The people on our front end, they know SQL. If they're building a report, they understand the data that's being put into the report, and they're perfectly capable of writing a Hive SQL query or a Teradata or a Redshift or whatever database you're using SQL query. And all we've really done is given them the ability to log into our job scheduling system and to schedule jobs themselves, which they're totally capable of doing. So the fact that they do it saves the organization from having the context switching, from having the kind of process handoff, requirements handoff time between two individuals, which over time is really a lot of savings. More broadly, we try to focus on having centers of excellence on our teams instead of having kind of role boundaries. And what I mean by that is, it's not that our front-end people can't do back-end work, it's that our front-end people are really good at the front-end side. And our back-end people are really good at the back-end side. But if both can kind of do a little bit of both, and if it would save both people time, if it would help people avoid the overhead associated with knowledge transfer, or even just scheduling problems, right? Even if it was just going to take the back-end guy, 3 days to get to it, and if the front-end guy can take care of it herself right then, we're all for that. Maybe some other examples. So our front-end folks use Python to automate tasks in our environment. Jason's awesome at Python. I know, because at our last hack day, he helped me implement a tool that would allow us to download Tableau workbooks directly from one of our querying tools. Our data engineers all have Tableau licenses, and just within the last couple of weeks, I went ahead and deployed a Tableau report for some of our stakeholders. And the reason I did it was that what the users wanted sounded pretty simple, and I already had the context. I had already built all the data pipelines. I understood the data very well. So rather than interrupting one of our front-end folks and trying to bring them into the project and give them all the context they would need to build the report, I stood something up for our users very quickly with my very limited knowledge of Tableau. And as it turns out, that was totally sufficient for them. I thought I was going to be deploying a V1, and then I'd pull in a front-end person to work on the V2 and the V3. But as it turns out, getting the V1 in front of our customer, it certainly helped the customer understand what they wanted better, and it allowed. It ended up being sufficient, and I didn't need to interrupt people on the front end. So with that, Jason's going to come up. He'll tell you. He'll do some more of the same. He'll give you some more examples from the front end side of the house.
Chris? I feel like I should probably re-ask that question that Chris asked about, people working on the front end and making data available for others. And I just see some hands if you happen to make data available via reports, emails, in some form or fashion. Who does that to others in your business? All right, so there's a few out there.
I just asked it wrong.
Yeah, it can't be too specific, right? So, hello everyone, I'm happy to be here. Talk a little bit more about the front end of the data platform at Netflix. I thought before we hopped into things that it might be good to just take a look at our platform slide again. This is a slightly trimmed down version. It doesn't have everything in the platform, but it has the areas that I would like to focus on today, which are kind of over here in this right-hand column. So tools like Tableau, MicroStrategy, Sting is an internal tool that we developed for reporting purposes, and then Python is also a tool that we use on a regular basis. So we use these tools, something like Tableau as an example to connect back to our data sources that you see over here. So Teradata and Redshift being a bit more of the traditional kind of databases that we would connect to, but also we've been leveraging Hive and Presto to connect back to our cloud-based, our S3-based data platform. And it's enabled us to do things that we haven't been able to do in the past, things that would have been previously much more difficult in the more traditional data environment. I'll go through a few of those examples as I proceed. So I'd like to make a few recommendations also in terms of things that work well for us at Netflix and that might help you in your environments. The first thing would be not to limit yourself to conventional tools. So like I mentioned on the previous slide, Tableau is a very powerful tool for us. We use Tableau and have found that it's best for data visualization and dashboarding. So we might have some sort of data visualization that we would like to build for our end users. We'll load that data into Tableau, work with the business users on something just to iterate very quickly. And it has worked out really well for those kind of quick ad hoc use cases, but also when we want to productionalize a dashboard and put something out there that's going to be live for a year or longer. Tableau has helped us in that area quite a bit. MicroStrategy helps us in another area. So we leverage MicroStrategy for its kind of advanced abilities in metadata and dynamic SQL generation. So we often have users that would like to create kind of drag and drop ad hoc reports. They want to go in and be able to drag in the data that they're interested in. And on the back end, we obviously need to somehow generate or create that, the queries that are necessary to pull that data in. So we found that so far, MicroStrategy has definitely worked really well for that use case. There's a bit more overhead in using MicroStrategy because of the metadata layer. You have to go in and kind of predefine all of your tables and your metadata. But the trade-off thus far has definitely made sense, and it has enabled us to put the control of those ad hoc reports in our users' hands. The next thing that I would mention is, again, don't just focus on these conventional tools or tools that you might have in your toolkit. Look out, look for opportunities to use tools that you could either build or potentially pull down from some open source project. One great example of this is we had some email reporting that we needed to do, and we were fighting our existing tools a little bit to get the email formatted exactly how we wanted it. So a person on our team actually decided, well, I can build this in Python pretty easily and just see what that might look like. And he ended up building a Python-based email reporting tool that took care of this need exactly the way that that we needed to. After that happened, we kind of realized, wow, this Python tool that he built is really simple and actually could be useful in many other areas. So we ended up taking that tool and kind of open sourcing it internally, and making it into something that multiple teams are now using at Netflix. And it's something that we are interested in kind of looking into potentially open sourcing externally also. So again, we kind of had that tool because we decided not to just use the conventional tools that we had. And it ended up being something that was very successful for us. So the next item that I would say here is to give your BI engineers superpowers. I don't know if I hear it over here, if anyone is familiar with who that is. I highly recommend watching the show. So what this really means is to empower your BI engineers. Chris touched on this a bit. Just because you're working on the front end and you are someone who doesn't usually do ETL, kind of working on the working in your back-end data platform, it doesn't mean that it's not a good idea for you to maybe get your hands dirty and get in there and build these data sets that you need. Like Chris mentioned, it can definitely help kind of move things quicker. And oftentimes the business intelligence engineers or the front-end engineers have the context that they need about that data. So to do this successfully, one really crucial part of this at Netflix is our data platform. So as a BI engineer, I focus on BI engineering. I focus on building data visualizations, building dashboards. I'm supported by a data platform that enables me to work with all of the different data kind of sets that you saw previously, so Hive and Teradata, using tools like Spark and Presto and Hive. So the platform is very important, and again, enabling your BI engineers to focus where they need to focus that attention. I would encourage you to just kind of think about how you can have the right people focused in the right areas, and kind of giving that data platform to really support them. Another thing that makes us very powerful as BI engineers at Netflix is we really work in the area of context and not requirements. So when we're working on a new business problem or we're kind of discussing a problem with our business, we don't really just take requirements for what they would like to see. We instead get in and we understand the context of the question and understand what they need to see for their, the problem that they're trying to understand. And using that context, we build a solution that would probably be much better than, if we had just taken basic requirements from them initially. The other thing I would mention is to be an early adopter. So this is something that has also been pretty successful for us. So if we think about our environment again, something like Tableau, we've been using connectors in Tableau that are still relatively new. A good example of that would be the Presto ODBC connector, which is a driver that's still in beta or still being worked on. There's definitely some overhead that comes along with using a driver that has not been in production for long. But what we find is the trade-off of using that driver and enabling us to get to our cloud-based data sets much faster than having to load them into the traditional databases is worth that trade-off. And it's actually enabled us to do some pretty awesome reports. One good example is an hourly report that we have, or an hourly dashboard that we have that's refreshing over 1 billion rows every hour using a combination of Hive and Presto. That would have been much more difficult to do in a more traditional environment. So when it comes to data visualization, I thought it would be good to just give you a few examples of real dashboards that we use internally. I will mention that all of the data in these dashboards is kind of fake data, but the dashboards are real, and they're actually in production today. So we have our kind of very basic things, and like these line charts that you see here at the top. You'll see that one of the key or the fundamental aspects that I keep in mind when I'm doing data visualization is that simple is often best. So you really want your users to be able to come in and understand something at a glance. So though these both look relatively simple, this bottom one, this heat map, is actually pretty interesting. This tells us a story about how customers are progressing through the episodes of a season in different regions. So these numbers across the top are episodes, and then these are regions on the left. So at a glance, someone can come in and take a look at this and say, oh, wow, we better take a look at what's going on with episode 3 in Brazil, just to get an idea of what might be happening there and why maybe people are completing that episode. There is a need to build out a little bit more complex data visualizations and to kind of present things a little bit differently. This dashboard is an example of something that we built out recently that allows our end users to better understand title availability across the world. So now that we're in over 190 countries, it kind of becomes an issue of just trying to understand where everything is available. So in this tool, they can come in and you have the titles on the left here, and across the top you get the regions where they can come in and see, well, we've got title 10 upcoming in region 1. But it's already available in these other regions. They can then click on this dashboard and see, so if they click on, region 1, title 10, they can see down here at the bottom where that title is available and in what windows it would be available. So they can see what the timeline looks like. Again, this is a relatively simple data visualization, but this has been a really, really powerful dashboard for us. It's something that the data was always there, but until we kind of visualized it this way, people just didn't have a great way to understand it and utilize it. And then the one other thing that I would mention is that there is definitely a use case for more complex data visualizations where you're going in and customizing these tools like Tableau and MicroStrategy to do what you need them to do. So there's always opportunity for that type of visualization also. This would be an example of a Tableau report that has some different types of charts that are a little bit more custom, but also just as powerful in terms of making them easy to understand at a glance. The next recommendation would be to dismantle your data here is if you currently operate in an environment where you have a centralized data warehouse team, you might want to consider breaking that up. And instead, and this is again has been pretty successful for our approach, is to integrate with the business. So if we look at how the data engineering and analytics teams at Netflix are aligned, we're aligned with our different businesses. So we're the DEA content team, there's a DEA marketing team, a DEA product team. They're all very closely aligned with the business. And what this enables us to do is literally sit alongside our business partners, participate in the same meetings that they go to where they're discussing the different kind of aspects of the business at both high level and very low level fine details. This again gives us this context that we wouldn't really have if we were just kind of a centralized team that was taking orders from what the requirements of the business might be. It does require us to stay in sync and stay aligned to some degree with our other data engineering teams, the ones that I mentioned. But what we've found is that it's actually better to be more aligned with your business than it is with your other data engineering teams. So by having this data platform that I mentioned earlier, it's kind of core across all of the data engineering teams, it gives us the ability to stay somewhat loosely coupled with the other data engineering teams, but still stay effective because we all use each other's data and oftentimes we do work together. But really what allows us to drive forward and make progress is that tight integration again with the business. And this is all enabled and all possible because of open and honest communication. So the ability for us to just say what needs to be said, call out problems when they're there, and just have those very direct and open conversations is something that enables all of this to work. So oftentimes fast is better than perfect. We might have a tendency to want to really polish something before we get it out there and go live with a new tool or a new dashboard that we're working on. I definitely have that problem. I like to have things just perfect if I can. But what we found is that building and launching V0.1 is oftentimes better than trying to wait until that V1 is really ready. Getting it in front of your business users and working with them to iterate and improve oftentimes results in a tool or a dashboard or a report that's going to be far better than it would have been if you would have just kind of gone off and worked on a tool on that report without kind of involving the business. And then as you're iterating, continue to repeat that iteration and improve as you go. Ad hocs are something that I think probably most of you are familiar with if you work in a data environment, where you get ad hoc requests from your business or from users of the data where they want to look at something that might not exist in an existing report. We definitely have that kind of thing at Netflix. The way that we normally handle it is, again, we will work with our business partners to understand what they're looking for. We'll take care of those ad hocs for them. And we have the freedom as BI engineers to either decide, okay, this ad hoc is something that is going to be useful for many other people. We hear this question quite often. We're going to just build a report or a dashboard that answers those questions. But oftentimes, these ad hocs might just be a one-off, something that we build once, give to the users, and that's what they need. So we kind of balance that ourselves and make sure that we continue to move forward and make progress and not get bogged down by all of the ad hoc requests. What all this really boils down to, though, is responsibility and ownership. So as we launch and put new products out, new dashboards out, we, as BI engineers, have responsibility to keep owning those tools. And because of that, because we continue to own them, we build them in a way that they're kind of low overhead. So we try to make them available and make them auto-refreshing so that we don't have to go in and care and feed them too much. The last item that I would mention here is to encourage hacking. So one thing that we do at Netflix that's pretty great is our hack day. It's just a time when everybody gets together and dedicates time to hacking and thinking of some new idea, something that maybe has not been done previously. One example of something that was kind of a hack but ended up being quite successful is actually Google Sheet integration with our data sets. So we have the need to enable our business users to go in and work with data that was based in our S3 data warehouse, in our Hive data warehouse. And we had previously kind of been the roadblock as the data team to enabling the business to interact with that data. So we decided, well, how can we enable them to get data into our data warehouse? And what we found, or what we decided to do, is actually just build a tool that integrates Google spreadsheets with that data in the data warehouse. So now, as a business user, they come in and work in an interface that they're very familiar with, Google Sheets. It's just like a spreadsheet. They can enter data, and then every night we load this data in. We actually write back data to the Google spreadsheet. And it's something that started out as more just kind of a, oh, we wonder if this would work, and has again been very successful in terms of giving that power to our end users and us just getting out of the way. So the end result of this is they were able to take all of these, this visualization at the top and turn it into this visualization at the bottom to group together all of these different suppliers and vendors. So something that, this is just a very basic example of how we use that integration. And that's all. So questions, and if anyone is interested, Netflix is definitely hiring. So please feel free to check us out. So now we have time for questions. I think we'll probably all be available. Sure.
Oh yeah, sure.
Anyone has a question?
So my question is, how do you connect Tableau with Hive? Like, are you directly connecting, or do you follow? How they perform?
Yeah, great question. So we're using the Hive ODBC connector in Tableau, which I believe goes through a Hive Thrift server. So it's connecting directly to Hive. The performance, I mean, the performance with the Hive connector is what you would expect from Hive. So depending on the complexity of the query, it's going to take just as long as it normally would with Hive. So what we've actually found is oftentimes it's good to materialize your data in Hive and then connect directly to it with Tableau. Because as you probably know, if you use Hive, sometimes a query could run for quite a long time, and you may not want that front-end interface to be held up by that query. So usually materializing is something that we choose to do in that case.
This is why our folks who build Tableau reports can schedule jobs in our ETL window, right? So that we don't have to run large Hive queries.
You don't want to help me out with this?
Well, my question might be unique from where you work. I'm comparing where I work with you guys, and I have managers telling me what to do and stacking the list of what's to be done first, what needs to be done tomorrow, et cetera, and what status meetings daily. How do you guys decide who works on what and what drives those things? It sounds very different. In other words, no one came up with a list and the managers went off and got the head count, came back and started working on this list to make it all get done.
Yeah, sure. So when Netflix was founded, you guys ever read anything about our CEO, Reed Hastings? Yeah, he and his founding team wanted to run their company very differently than what they had seen in the past. So if you Google for the Netflix culture deck, it'll explain some of the core principles that he and the founding team put together. The biggest driving principle for managers is context, not control. So their thought process is, if you hire really great people, instead of telling them what to do, what to work on, you should give them context. And what that means is kind of explain the situation, right? Explain what the business is trying to achieve. And then just trust the fact that the great people that you've hired are going to use excellent judgment to figure out what's worth their time and what isn't. So our managers tend to act more as sounding boards. They'll try to give us as much context as possible into why certain efforts are trying to get accomplished, what the impact of different efforts will have. But when I get requests from folks for new data pipelines, one of the things that I'll ask is, we're in the content world, like how much money are we going to spend on this category of content? To try to help me figure out, is this request worth more of my time than maybe something else I'm getting from someone else? So it's a very different way of operating a business, but the idea is that if you have a lot more people working to solve problems, a lot more people who are in the trenches, and if you empower them to make the decisions, they're probably going to make better decisions because they have more information than people further up.
To add to what Chris said, so in practical terms, the way that we work out is kind of at the beginning of the quarter, you have a sense of some major accomplishments that you need to kind of look forward to. And then on a day-to-day basis or week-to-week basis, you're not having like a check-in to say where this is at. You're kind of driving the project with your own sense of priority, your own sense of what needs to get done, the individual components yourself. And if you hit a roadblock, like you even interface with other teams yourself, you kind of drive that this is what we're focusing on, and why are we focusing on that? So maybe last year we would say something like, okay, we all know that we're going global next year. So this falls into that priority bucket. And so let's kind of work together to achieve that. And when you encounter roadblocks, you can see like what needs to happen to get on the same page. So your manager will come in and step in if needed to kind of facilitate that discussion. But on a day-to-day basis, you're empowered to make those decisions, make those technical decisions, and then kind of say, okay, I made this decision, and I know this is the trade-off that I'm making, and kind of be able to support that with your team and with your other stakeholders. You really are the owner.
I should say too, I came from a more traditional project management environment. So when I started at Netflix, I thought these people were crazy. I thought there was no way it was going to work. But over time, I've come to appreciate how nimble it makes the organization. Things in the organization change, the organization moves directions, and this company, for its size, a company with $40 billion market cap, can pivot so quickly. It's, if you're looking to do that with your company, this is, I think, a great one.
Next question.
My question is, you don't see Presto DB a lot, kind of in practice. A lot of the attention is kind of with other SQL over Hadoop technologies like Impala or maybe Apache Drill. What were some of the reasons that Netflix went with Presto DB? And were there any learnings or edge cases that kind of made you guys realize that it wasn't Presto could not solve all of your data analytics problems and you had to solve it in another fashion?
I can tell you a little bit about what I know. If we had somebody from our data platform team here, they could probably tell you in a little bit more detail why they kind of recommended Presto to the data engineering organization. So let's see what the limitations of Presto are. I think Presto is really a great database product. The biggest thing that we've run into with it is, because it's so new, if you hit it with a lot of users and a lot of concurrent queries, poorly written queries or queries that take more resources than the person submitting it intended can kind of hurt the cluster. It doesn't have very much or any workload management. But the little that it has available, I think we've got something where we've just limited the amount of memory that each task can take, and that's been pretty effective at stopping and killing runaway queries and keeping our Presto cluster available. In terms of the speed with which the community is able to add features and functionality, it's been just amazing to watch how quickly Presto has developed in the last year and a half. And man, just how fast it is compared to compared to Hive. So I'm not sure why we went with Presto over Impala or over Drill. I have a sense that some of it was timing, where Presto was at the time we made the decision to adopt it. But I can tell you that so far our data engineering organization is really happy with it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And my second question is, when you were talking about the deformalization of pushing to production and kind of having, all hands on deck where anybody can have access to drop tables, I can completely understand that within the context of Hive external tables on a OLAP platform. But would you make those same recommendations for an OLAP platform?
So,
Something where transactional processing, like say, I'm sure Netflix has systems where they're processing membership, subscription, and processing financial data. Would those same rules apply of deformalizing the rollout to production?
I don't have a direct answer to that. I can't speak to how our OLTP systems are exactly managing permissions there. I can tell anecdotally my experience working with source engineering systems that are maintaining transactions, and I asked them, can I take a look at your tables? And they were like, yeah. I was like, can I get read-only? I want to make sure I don't want to mess anything up. They were like, no, it's freedom and responsibility. And so I was like, okay. So that makes me think that our OLTP systems have kind of the same thinking as well about freedom and responsibility.
We should kind of separate the folks that have legal requirements. So all of our financial data that's subject to SOX reporting, we're going to treat that very differently than even operational or OLTP systems that are not subject to to oversight because we're a public company. So the way that we kind of think about that is the teams in charge of those different systems understand what requirements they need to follow, and are going to put the appropriate measures in place that will allow us to move as quickly as possible and place as much trust in the people typing as possible. I know for a fact that we have operational systems that the business relies on, where the engineers, yes, can log into production and can make changes. Because it's really, the concept hasn't changed, right? In your transactional system, people aren't going to log in and kind of drop the wrong table very often.
That's not what they're trying to protect. The
what was that? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
The answer is that they're not trying to protect you from that.
Yeah?
The problem is that when people do malicious stuff to divert funds, or inactively adjust the rate which will hit your stock.
Sure, yeah.
That's why cyber came in. You have regulatory compliance requirements to do certain roadblocks in order for one person not being able to go and adjust something.
Yes.
Say to someone, hey, you know what, those guys' stock will go down.
Yeah.
Because something that one person did.
So we should talk for a minute about bad actors, right? So when talking about financial systems, absolutely. Those are subject to a very different kind of oversight than the rest of the systems of our company, right? But let's think about other extremely important operational systems for a business like Netflix. Like, you can talk about the systems that are running which movies get cached in our CDNs around the country, right? For us, these are extremely important systems for the product, for the availability of the service. But at the same time, if a bad actor was to get involved, how much damage could they really do, right? So those are the kinds of things that teams, when designing how much kind of red tape we need to put in place, those are the kinds of things that they'll consider.
Two more questions.
pretty far. So maybe 3 questions.
We'll make it one, you know, the people to go through.
So, for example, Daredevil season 2, what were some of the reports that you guys pulled? What team members were you working with to make sure that season 2 is going to be a success for Daredevil? And also, what will you guys feel about Maki?
So, you know, we obviously can't dig too deep into specifics, but, you know, looking at, you know, viewing behavior and how customers are consuming our content, kind of like the heat map that I showed you earlier, where we're looking at the progression of episodes through, you know, through a season for different regions. There are a number of metrics, you know, along those lines that we look at for every season that we launch and keep an eye on, you know, what things are looking like. And it really, you know, just comes down to what our content planning partners need to understand, whether or not, you know, that season is efficient and successful on our service, and whether or not the customers are enjoying it, right? It kind of comes down to that are the customers getting the value out of this season that we want them to get? I know it's kind of high level, but that's truly, you know, the core.
Simple question. What's the difference between a data architect and a
It's a great question. So Netflix has, in terms of job titles, everybody is actually like a senior software engineer. That's kind of the role that we have. Mine is senior data architect because that's what it was on LinkedIn. It's totally, you know, Chris and I did data engineering work. It was data architect, data engineer. We're all like, in terms of roles, it's all senior software engineers.
When I started, Kevin asked me, what job title do you think best describes your role? What do you think best describes what you're doing on a day-to-day basis? And why don't you use that? He didn't come and say, this is a, well, I shouldn't, you know, of course we posted it as a data engineer position, but we're not big on, you know, titles and
there really are boundaries, boundaries for the roles, right? There's a lot of, you know, there are areas that you're specifically focused on, but, you know, like a similar thing for a senior BI engineer could also be a senior data visualization engineer and do, you know, very similar or the same activities. So it's really just kind of the role.
Yeah, if I want to change the title on my business card, I think I can just call the business card folks and do that.
Right, I think we're going to wrap up. I think you guys are video a little bit of questions here.
Yeah, we'll be here.
We need to leave here by 8:30, so how much of our time we can get with them if they're brains. One last thing, we're still looking for speakers for Big Data Daily. So if you're interested in speaking, please submit your proposal. Thanks once again, and thanks to Netflix. Yeah.
How are you doing, man?